Welcome back to Milton Mo Junction. A little different this time because I'm in the conservatory where I've been working on a turntable. Further from the previous video where I was talking about the turntables and making decisions, well, I've made a decision. It was pretty much what I think I was going to do anyway, but thanks for some of your comments, and it reinforced, a couple of them especially reinforced what I was thinking, and so I've decided to go for an ADM turntable in the diesel area and get rid of sell the Fleischmann one and put another Peco turntable, because the ADM, as you probably know, is basically a Peco turntable anyway. I'm going to put another Peco turntable, but a manually turned one, in the heritage yard. So I've started completing that little project, and this is pretty much it. The bridge has been built and weathered, as you can see here. What I did was I painted the bridge black, or sprayed it black, matte black, and I dry brushed it with I think it was actually I don't know what they call it, I think it's US Field Drab Brown, and dry brushed it with that, kept dry brushing it until it gave it a more of a wooden, dirty sleeper look. Then I put some washes on it and dry varnished it, and it's come out what I think is quite nice. The rails, as you can see, I sprayed a sort of off yellow and then weathered those with washes and weathering powders, so they now look like a dirty yellow rail that's in need of a paint and a clean. And underneath the girders, I've sprayed and weathered those. I sprayed them with the first colour, and I used the salt method of weathering, where I've sprayed one colour onto it while it's still wet, sprinkled salt crystals over it, let it dry, and then sprayed the second colour. And when that's dried, scrape off the salt crystals, and it leaves this sort of mottled effect with two colours. It's supposed to be, originally it was blue, and it's now got the rust coming through. I then weathered it, and further washes and weathering powders, and I'm quite pleased with the way that's come out. So that's pretty much finished now. Oh no, the wheels section obviously I've weathered and dirted, and so that's all done. Excuse me. The only thing I've really changed from the original is, if any of you are aware how the Peco turntable works, it gets the power to the track from two plungers. There's only one here now, so that's to the nearest track obviously. The second track would have a similar sort of plunger. The plungers, so you have two plungers, the plungers then run around on this copper ring. Now the copper ring originally has quite large gaps in the middle, so that the two polarities don't run together. Obviously if it does a full 380 or past the halfway point, the polarity changes, which is in itself not a problem, because that can be sorted with a frog juicer in the circuit. But the problem arises if you're using sound, because at that brief second that the both plungers cross over the middle point, both tracks receive no power. If it's not a sound loco, that's probably not a problem, because you'll hardly notice it. I mean, the engine is not moving anyway, and so as the turntable turns, the power cuts out fine. It's only going to move a fraction and it gets its power back. But obviously with a sound loco, the problem arises when the sound cuts out and then starts up again. It's worse with a diesel, because a diesel tends to have to go through the engine startup sequence when it loses power. So I had to figure a way around it. So my method has been on the circle. I've put one side down on one side how it should go, and the opposite for the other side, and then instead of folding the other parts down, I've just shortened the length and then glued them down straight, so there's a very little gap between them. So hopefully the plunger won't be affected, and as I say, all the circle will be one polarity, and the plunger will always go for that particular polarity. So for instance, the nearest rail will always be positive. So I needed to get a negative feed to the furthest rail, and the way I've coped with that is I've put a metal rod up the centre, and I'm not sure if you can see, I've soldered a wire to the other rail, dropped it down and then resoldered it to this rod. So the rod will be negative and the plunger will be positive. And the way to feed the power to this, obviously this part is fixed to the basin part of the turntable, so that doesn't move, so there's no problem about fitting the wires to this section, which they'll both be, as I said, positive, and that will be permanently fixed. The problem arises again when you're trying to get the negative to here, because you can't solder the second wire here, it will just wrap around as it turns. So my method of fixing that, when it's in position, I'll put two bolts, one below and one above a washer, which will be free running. I'll then solder the cable to the washer, and as that turns, the washer's making contact with it the whole time, but is relatively loose, so that it'll just turn, the wire will stay the same, and hopefully that'll all work. Only time will tell, but that's my idea anyway. So I'll show you the rest of the turntable when I've finished, and we'll carry on from there. Continuing on with my turntable, as you can see, I've now I've sprayed the basin in a base colour, and then I've painted it with a textured concrete paint, which I've weathered, and a few oil spills around. I've brick papered the walls and weathered those, so I'm reasonably pleased with that. I might do a bit more weathering, depends what I decide to make the ground like that's going in. If I'm going to make it, overgrown, I may well put some weeds growing in the basin somewhere, but I haven't really decided that yet. So this is a basis for it, and I'm reasonably pleased with the way it's come out. Underneath, I've done the wiring. As you can see, as I mentioned before, I've joined up the two outlets from the the copper ring. So the copper ring is completely going to be positive all the way around. So the one pickup will pick up that all the way around. So one of the rails is constantly positive, and the other rail is negative, fed up through the centre bolt or rod, and that is conducted through this washer, which is wired, and obviously that will turn, the washer will turn, the washer will stay still and the rod will turn, so that can put negative charge through the whole thing. I've checked it on the meter for continuity, and that's okay, it runs okay all the way through, no problem. So for the time being, that is my work done down here, doing the weathering, etc., and building the turntable. So I'll now go back up in the loft and continue with the heritage yard. We're now back up in the loft, and I'm sorting out the track work for the heritage yard. What I've done so far is I've fixed down these 4 points here and put point motors on them, so everything's ready to go. I've also added, as you can see here, a semaphore signal. That is linked to the same address as a point well underneath here that diverts from the main line the outer line going round into the heritage yard. So there's one point that either lets the train go into the heritage yard or continue onto the outer run round track. And what I've done, if I alter the point to allow tracks in or trains in or out of the heritage yard, it opens up the signal. So that is an indicator whether trains can leave the heritage yard and go out onto the main track. So that's all ready. What I'm doing at the moment, as I say, is working out the point work that's going to come into the yard, and pretty much done that. So now it's the track in the yard itself, and I've got to make a position for the turntable. Now there's not much leeway because of the boarding underneath, the strengthening underneath, but there is a bit, so I haven't cut the hole yet so that I can position it in the best sort of position. I mean, as I say, there's not a lot of leeway, it's got to be somewhere in the area here, but just lay some tracks to see where I basically want it. So I'll continue on and then come back to you. I think I've pretty much worked out the track plan. There's going to be this one here is going to be the raising line that goes to feed the coal-in stage. This second one will be the engine, the route to the coal-in stage to recoal. This line, the next one, by this little sort of temporary platform, will be another line where people in the heritage yard can go into a carriage and perhaps go for a little ride. Or a static carriage, one of the two. Then we have the next line will go in and feed the turntable, and then there'll be 3 lines out of the turntable. 2 will go into the carriage, into the engine shed, and a third will go along beside it and bend round as if it's going under the bridge, but it will be a cut off there. There'll be an old disused line, so there'll be some storage availability in it, but it won't actually go anywhere. So I've pretty much decided where the turntable is going to go, so my next job is to cut the hole for the turntable, and then finish off cutting and pinning down the track. This all may take a bit of time because I want to do the sides for the for this whole area so that nothing falls off. So that, as I say, may take some time. So what I'll do is I'll end this video now and show you later when I've done some more work on another video. So bye for now. Thanks for watching. If you've got any comments or suggestions, questions, please feel free to leave them, and subscribe if you wish. But as I say, thanks for watching, and bye for now.